Now, on a bit more of a serious note, we were trying to determine how you'd describe your brand of humor. How would you describe it?
Funny.
Hey there, everybody. Buckle up, because we're about to dive into a wild ride full of secrets and surprises about the kings of stoner comedy, Cheech and Chong. You know them for their hazy punchlines, their iconic movies, and that perfect vibe they bring to every scene. But what if I told you there's a whole lot more to their story that you've probably never heard? These guys didn't just stumble into fame with a joint and a joke. Their journey is packed with twists, struggles, and moments that'll make your jaw drop. Stick with me, because by the end of this, you'll see Cheech and Chong in a whole new light. And trust me, the last fact we're saving for the end? It's gonna blow your mind. Let's jump in. Picture this. It's the late 1960s, and two guys who couldn't be more different are about to cross paths in the most unexpected place. Richard Cheech Marin was born in South Los Angeles, raised by a dad who was a police officer. Yeah, a cop's kid. Can you believe that? Cheech wasn't dreaming of comedy clubs or movie sets. Nope, he was all about pottery, shaping clay and firing kilns at California State University Northridge. But life had other plans. The Vietnam War was raging, and the draft was breathing down his neck. Cheech didn't believe in that war, and he wasn't about to risk his life for it. So, he made a bold move. He packed up and headed to Canada to dodge the draft. "I didn't want to get killed in Vietnam," he said later, and you can't blame him. That choice changed everything. Now, life in Canada wasn't exactly a party for Cheech. He was a stranger in a new country, scraping by with whatever jobs he could find. He drove trucks, hauled carpets, and kept messing around with his pottery. It was tough, and he was just trying to keep his head above water. One night, desperate for work, he walked into a club in Vancouver. And not just any club, a topless bar called the Shanghai Junk. Sounds like the start of a wild story, right? Well, it was. That's where he met Tommy Chong. And let me tell you, Tommy's life was already a roller coaster of its own. Tommy Chong was born in Edmonton, Alberta, to a Chinese dad and a Scottish-Irish mom. Before he was cracking jokes, he was strumming chords. Tommy was a musician, playing guitar in a band called Bobby Taylor the Vancouvers. They were good too, good enough to get signed by Motown. But by the early 1970s, Tommy had moved on from music and was running the Shanghai Junk. He wasn't just running a strip club, though. Tommy had a vision. He mixed burlesque with improv comedy, creating a sketch group called CityWorks that performed between the dancers' sets. It was weird, it was bold, and it was totally Tommy. He loved pushing boundaries, and this place was his playground. So, one fateful night in 1970, Cheech walks into the Shanghai Junk, just looking for a paycheck. Tommy takes one look at him and thinks, why not? There was something about Cheech, maybe his quick wit, maybe his vibe, that caught Tommy's eye. He invited Cheech to join the improv group, and that's when the sparks started flying. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to create something legendary. One night, during a show, they started riffing. Cheech was looking for his buddy Dave, and Tommy, playing the ultimate stoner, kept saying, "Dave's not here, man." It wasn't planned, it wasn't scripted, it just happened, and the crowd lost it. That accidental bit became their first big hit, and it showed them they had something special. From that moment, Cheech and Chong were born. Tommy played the chilled-out hippie, always floating in a cloud of smoke. Cheech was the fast-talking, sharp-witted guy who kept the energy high. Their styles clicked like puzzle pieces, and soon, they were packing clubs in Vancouver. It didn't take long for them to realize they could take this act on the road. They left the Shanghai Junk behind and hit the comedy circuit as a duo. Their humor was raw, irreverent, and spoke to a generation that was all about breaking the rules. They weren't just telling jokes. They were capturing a whole counterculture vibe. And it all started in a topless bar. How's that for a crazy origin story? Their rise was meteoric. They recorded comedy albums that flew off the shelves, toured across the U.S., and made movies that became cult classics. Up in Smoke, their first film, was a game changer, turning them into household names. But as big as they got, things weren't always as chill as they seemed. Behind the scenes, Cheech and Chong's relationship was a lot more complicated than their on-screen bromance. They weren't best buddies hanging out, smoking, and laughing all day. In fact, their partnership was more like a sibling rivalry, full of love, loyalty, and a whole lot of fighting. Cheech once said they were like brothers, not best friends. They could argue 1 minute and then hit the stage and nail their act the next. It was like they had two lives, the one the audience saw, where everything was hilarious and easy, and the one backstage, where egos clashed and tempers flared. Cheech wrote in his memoir that their chemistry was like a pearl forming in an oyster. It came from irritation, from pushing each other, but somehow, that friction created something beautiful. Isn't that wild? The very thing that made them so great together was also tearing them apart. One of the biggest issues was creative control. They both wrote their movies, but Tommy took the director's chair for 4 of their 6 big films from 1978 to 1984. For Cheech, that felt unfair. He was pouring his heart into their work, but he often felt like his ideas were being sidelined. It was a very touchy thing, he said later. Tommy, on the other hand, saw directing as a natural role for himself. He loved calling the shots, but that created a power imbalance that Cheech couldn't ignore. Things got so heated that, in a documentary years later, Tommy straight up told Cheech he didn't really direct. Cheech fired back. "That's a lie. I directed just as much as you." Ouch. Hearing them argue like that must have been a shock for fans who thought they were inseparable. By the early 1980s, things were starting to crack. During the making of their 1981 film, Nice Dreams, Cheech felt Tommy was taking over. Tommy wanted to write everything, direct everything, and make all the decisions. For Cheech, it was like being pushed out of a partnership they'd built together. He didn't want to be the sidekick in his own story. The tension kept building until 1985, when they released their album Get Out of My Room. Cheech had a new project he was excited about, a song called Born in East LA. He asked Tommy to help record it, but Tommy said no. That was the breaking point. Cheech went solo, turning the song into a hit movie. It was a big success, but it marked the end of their 17-year run as a duo. Years later, Tommy admitted he might have been the problem. He called himself a megalomaniac back then, saying that directing gave him too much power, and he didn't want to let it go. "Your word's God," he said, and that control went to his head. It's kind of sad, isn't it? The same drive that made their movies so great also drove a wedge between them. They did reunite now and then for tours or interviews, but things were never quite the same. Cheech even said there was still animosity when they got back together. Healing old wounds takes time, and for Cheech and Chong, it's been a long road. But here's the thing. Cheech and Chong are so much more than their stoner comedy roots. Sure, they're legends for their weed jokes, but both of them built careers that stretched way beyond that. Let's talk about Cheech first. Did you know he's a voice acting star? That's right. His raspy, charismatic voice has been in some huge animated movies. He played Banzai, the hyena, in Disney's The Lion King. How cool is that? He's also Ramon, the stylish lowrider in the Cars movies, and he voiced Stump, a funny beetle in Fern Gully, The Last Rainforest, alongside Robin Williams. Cheech's voice is so distinct, it's no wonder Disney kept calling him back. Tommy's no slouch either. He jumped into voice acting too, playing himself in a hilarious South Park episode called Cherokee Hair Tampons. It was classic Tommy, poking fun at himself and new age wellness trends. But their talents didn't stop at cartoons. In 2010, Cheech and Chong showed up somewhere you'd never expect, WWE Raw. Yup, they guest hosted a pro wrestling show. They were there to promote their Get It Legal tour, but they didn't just stand around. They got in on the action, joking around with wrestler Santino Marella about marijuana in his tea. It was ridiculous, it was funny, and it showed how they could fit in anywhere. Then there's the serious side of their story. Both Cheech and Chong have used their fame to talk about bigger issues. Tommy, especially, got real in a documentary called AKA Tommy Chong. It dives into his arrest in 2003 for selling bongs online, a case many saw as the Jesus, Overman targeting him for his stoner image. The film isn't just about Tommy. It's about the war on drugs and how it was used to go after certain people. It showed a side of Tommy that's thoughtful and resilient, not just the goofy hippie from the movies. Now, let's get to the mind-blowing stuff. Here are 4 things you didn't know about Cheech and Chong that'll leave you stunned. First up, they almost starred in a Friday the 13th movie. No joke. In 1986, the director of Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, Tom McLaughlin, pitched a wild idea to have Cheech and Chong face off against Jason Voorhees. Imagine them as stoner camp counselors or running a weed farm in the woods, stumbling into Jason's path. It never happened, but just thinking about it is hilarious. Could you picture Cheech saying, "Man, that guy with the hockey mask is harshing my vibe"? Second, that famous MUFDVR license plate from Up in Smoke? It wasn't made up by the movie crew. It was a real vanity plate owned by an LAPD officer. The plate started on a beat-up American Motors Gremlin, then moved to a cool Corvette, and finally ended up on a customized VW Bug. The officer still has it, complete with old California DMV stickers. How's that for a wild coincidence? A cop's license plate becoming a stoner movie icon is peak Cheech and Chong. Third, Jack Nicholson, the legend himself, was in so much pain watching Up in Smoke that he couldn't stop laughing. Producer Lou Adler said Jack showed up to an early screening with a dislocated shoulder from a car accident. His doctor told him not to laugh because it had hurt too much, but Jack couldn't help it. Every joke had him groaning and chuckling through the pain. Those reactions actually helped the filmmakers figure out which jokes were the best. Oh, and that beat-up VW Beetle in the movie? It was Jack's real car. Finally, here's the one that'll really surprise you. The script for their movie Nice Dreams? It was only 3.5 pages long. Most movie scripts are hundreds of pages, but Cheech and Chong did it their way. The original idea was about them as landscapers secretly growing weed across LA, but it turned into a crazy story about selling pot from an ice cream truck with a giant clown face. Even with that short script, every slapstick moment and chase scene was carefully planned out. They made it look so effortless, but it was all crafted with precision. That's the story of Cheech and Chong, a tale of 2 guys who met by chance, fought like brothers, and created a legacy that's so much bigger than stoner comedy. They've made us laugh, they've made us think, and they've shown us that sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places. So, what did you think of these crazy stories? Did they blow your mind as much as they did mine? Hit that like button if you loved learning about Cheech and Chong, share this video with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more wild tales from the world of entertainment. Click that video popping up on your screen for another awesome story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.